Hey Emily, okay, I'm going to attempt to do this lesson fairly quickly. Hopefully you have already done your writing prompt. I thought I would try to do it like we did it in class, where you open it up for 10 minutes or so and you answer it and then you submit it. So if you haven't done your writing prompt yet, open up that Google Doc, write that writing prompt. Pick one of the two. You don't have to do both of them, but pick one of the two and then submit it and then jump back onto this video. So, okay, so, oh, I'm in the wrong one again. Let me get off of this PowerPoint. Where did it go? There it is. Okay, our last lesson, I think you snuck out a little bit early on Wednesday, but we were reading the Declaration of Independence. We had just finished the movie John Adams, and then we jumped into the Declaration of Independence. We read through it and talked about the fact that Thomas Jefferson was making the case for independence. It was almost like a legal document, and at the beginning of several of the paragraphs it said, he did this, and he did that, and he did this, and he caused this, and essentially he's talking about King George III. And he's making the case to the American people, to Parliament, to world nations, that the reason that the colonies had to declare independence from Great Britain was because they were abusing their power, they were taking advantage of their English citizens abroad, they were violating the constitutional rights, the British constitutional rights of its English citizens, and that we had had enough and it was time to go ahead and say what already existed, that we were free, independent states separate from England. And so that effectively kicks off the American Revolution. Although technically we were already at war, blood had already been shed, Lexington and Concord had happened, the Battle of Bunker Hill had happened, but technically the Declaration of Independence and submitting that to King George was the official start of the war. I usually say it started before that though. So anyway, we're going to start class today by watching the video clip from the Hamilton musical of King George singing "You'll Be Back," and it's a funny satirical rendition of how King George may have been feeling upon hearing that the Americans were declaring independence. Now, obviously, he concluded that there's no way they're going to beat us. We're going to have to send more troops over there. We're going to have to go to war with them and subjugate them, but there's no way they'll beat us. Of course, we do. But he is convinced that once the 13 colonies, now states, realized how difficult it was to actually govern, that they would decide that they wanted to be members of the English Empire again and come back. So anyway, if you have Hamilton, if you have Disney Plus, you can watch the first, I can't remember where exactly it's at in the show. I'll see if I can find, oh, my son is, there we go. Chapman was texting me something. I'll see if I can find a link on YouTube. It may be a bad quality, but you'll still be able to see it. So, and then I show them a picture of John Trumbull's impression of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, or at least submitting the text of the Declaration of Independence to John Hancock. Take a look at that picture in the PowerPoint. It's really interesting. I mean, you can identify the various characters. John Trumbull, who's the painter of this particular painting, went to great pains to make sure that the various people depicted in it, which is everybody that was there, are depicted correctly. You can see who John Adams is. You can see Thomas Jefferson with red hair, Benjamin Franklin, and then there were a couple of other gentlemen. You see John Hancock sitting in the president's chair. There's a few other men that if you knew them that are in the crowd, you would probably be able to identify. So anyway, take a look at that. And then there are a couple pictures of my family at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and I'm just going to share with them my experience. I think I did share my experience a little bit about walking up to the railing and looking into the room and imagining what it would have been like to have been there. I think probably one of the most powerful lines in the movie John Adams is when John Adams is making his final appeal to Congress for independence, and he asked the question, how many people in the course of human history have actually had the opportunity or the privilege to choose their own form of government? And the answer is very, very few until probably the last century. And and our Constitution, our way of living, has spread around the world, and we have the privilege of being able to form our own kind of government. There's also a picture there of me with my mouth open going, and there's a room behind me, and that particular picture, I'm going to explain to the class as well, was me standing in the apartment row house where Thomas Jefferson actually sat around the table and penned the words of the Declaration of Independence. So when he was living in Philadelphia during the Continental Congress for those few months, he rented an upstairs bedroom and kitchen, I believe, from a man who owned a home, one of those row houses in Philadelphia. And he sat around that table and he worked and worked and worked. You can tell in the next picture, there's a picture of Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson all kind of working through the text of the Declaration, and it looks very similar to that room. So it's kind of neat that they thought to preserve that room so that future generations could actually see where it took place. So, and then since we read the Declaration of Independence in class together and kind of struggled through the old English of the way that it's written, I decided to show the kids a clip from National Treasure where, I can't think of his name, I can't remember his name, Nicolas Cage sneaks into the National Archives where the Declaration of Independence is kept and attempts to steal it. I'm hoping that when you guys go to Washington, D.C. in October, that you'll be able to go into the National Archives and see the Declaration of Independence with your very own eyes. Several of the museums in Washington, D.C. have been closed here and there and off and on because of COVID. So I'm really hoping that it'll be open and you guys will be able to see it. So I wanted you to see what that room looks like. There's a couple of pictures here that show the casing of the Declaration of Independence. And just like in the movie, the way the National Treasure movie depicts it, the Declaration, the Constitution, and a few other documents are in these sealed, temperature-controlled vaults so that they don't fade anymore. The Declaration is so faded that you can barely see it. You can see John Hancock's signature and a few other letters, but a lot of it is almost completely faded. And so they are kept and preserved. There's a video link that I want you to watch through the National Archives. And it tells about the last time that the Declaration of Independence was transported from one casing to the newest one that it is in now. And I can't remember what year they moved it, but the woman that's interviewing, she's in charge of a lot of that stuff, and she and another scientist or archivist, I don't know what you call them, were the last ones to actually touch the Declaration of Independence. You know, in the National Treasure movie, they think there's a secret map on the back of it, and they put lemon on it, lemon juice, and they spray, use a blow dryer, and this thing appears, not a map, but a thing appears, what do they call that? Anyway, doesn't matter. So anyway, I want you to watch that video. It's super interesting. It's only a few minutes long, but there also is a mystery behind the Declaration of Independence, and I have a picture of the Declaration of Independence on a slide, and if you are looking in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that there's a handprint. Kind of looks like that a little bit over here, and it looks like somebody had grease or ink or something on their hands, maybe when they were signing it. Nobody knows for sure. They wonder if it maybe got put on the Declaration when it was being transported from one box to the other. It actually was stored in, it was rolled up and stored in Thomas Jefferson's house for a while. It was stored in the Navy office in a closet for a while. So there were several years where it didn't see the light of day and was just kind of haphazardly stored in a tub. It was even stored at Fort Knox during World War II. The founding documents were moved to Fort Knox to be protected during World War II. I guess they were afraid of a Japanese invasion or something. So anyway, I'd like for you to watch that. And then we're going to move on and begin to talk about the American Revolution and the actual battles itself. I will make you a copy of the next page of timeline. The one that you have right now starts with the French and Indian War and goes to the Declaration of Independence. And then the one that we're going to start talking about today is going to start with independence and visit the first couple of significant events in the war. But we're not going to talk about the entire war. We don't have time to do that. But we are going to hit like the major 4 or 5 battles that, you know, turn the tide in our favor. And you'll also notice there are a few terms that I want you to be familiar with. Tories, Patriots, Lemuel, Haynes, Thomas Paine, Baron von Steuben, and Marquis de Lafayette. If we have time today, we're going to talk about each of them, each of these terms. But Tories, they were people who were colonists, American colonists, but they were loyal to the crown. And I think the book says about 20% of the total population, by the time the war started, remained loyal to King George III, one of those being Benjamin Franklin's own son. And from what I read in the book and what I've heard, their relationship was pretty much severed over that. I don't know that they even ever spoke again, which is pretty sad. Patriots, of course, were colonists who were in favor of the independence movement and the American Revolution. Lemuel Haynes was a black minister, and I think he was from Massachusetts. I need to go back and look. But he was an example of a black or an African American in the colonists who fought for the cause of independence, whereas a lot of the black slaves and perhaps some of the free black Americans were in favor of the British. In fact, the British offered slaves, if they came and fought with them in the war, that they would gain their freedom. And so there were twice as many of those that deserted their places of enslavement, or in some cases for free blacks that switched sides and went to fight for the British. So Thomas Paine, we've talked about him before. He wrote Common Sense, which was a political pamphlet that encouraged the independence movement. He went and joined Washington's army and was with Washington in the dark months, dark days of December 1776, when things were looking pretty bleak. The soldiers were underprepared, they were not well supplied, they were hungry, wintertime was falling, they were trying to stay away from the British army, and things were looking pretty bad. And he wrote a short essay, and part of that was these are the times that try men's souls. And he goes on to talk about, if you're really a patriot, now is the time to prove it and stick with your country and fight on, because this is the stuff that makes soldiers out of men. And so anyway, I think the book says that George Washington read that essay to his troops on December 23rd, 1776, something like that, shortly before the Battle of Trenton. And then Baron von Steuben was a Prussian drill sergeant, basically, that Washington brought into his camp to whip the boys into shape, because they were the militias that were fighting with George Washington didn't have a lot of professional soldiering training, and so Baron von Steuben helped in that. He also looked at the way the camps were set up, and there was a lot of people that were suffering from dysentery, which is diarrhea and stomach problems, because their sewage systems and their kitchens and their bathrooms and where they wash things was all kind of in the same vicinity. And so you had a lot of crossover pathogens where they were using water that had been contaminated. And so he was like, ugh. So he cleaned the camp up. He taught the men how to soldier. He taught certain members of Washington's crew how to lead, and then he sent those leaders out to train the soldiers, and so he got the soldiers into shape, into better fighting shape. Marquis de Lafayette is a Frenchman. We will hear more about him. Hold on. I think the book said he was in his teens when he joined Washington, 21 or so when the war kind of got heated up. And he fought alongside George Washington. He was like a son to George Washington. And George Washington was old enough to be his father at that point. And he fought for the Americans on behalf of the French, and eventually helped the convince the French to recognize the 13 states as an independent country, and eventually the French came alongside and fought with us and supplied us weapons. And so we'll talk more about him later. Okay, so in your timeline, All right, so we have the independence movement. The first big significant battle is the Battle of Long Island. And so if you remember the John Adams movie, the delegate from New York did not want to vote for independence. In fact, he abstained from voting altogether. He didn't vote no eventually, but he abstained from voting, and that's because the British Navy was making their way to New York Harbor, and he was very certain, and he was correct, that that would be the next place the British would engage in battle. And so the British didn't immediately put boots on the ground, but they did sail up the Hudson River and wait, and really rattled people, and ultimately the Battle of Long Island was the first battle once independence was declared. It was quite a debacle. Washington had been there for months, digging in, training his men, preparing for war, and at the end of the day, the British found a back door onto Long Island. And Long Island is that part of New York that literally is like a long island that goes out into the water. So there's a lot of water access to it. And the British found a back door that Washington didn't know about, and came in behind his troops, and his troops reacted and just fled and panicked. Fortunately, God intervened, and on the night that Washington's troops were trying to evacuate to get away from the British so they didn't get captured, they were able to cross the Hudson River in the dark of night under a incredibly thick fog, so that the British didn't even know they were moving. And when the next morning, when the sun broke and the fog finally cleared, the British realized that most of them had gotten away, which saved Washington's tail. So I'm going to show the kids a short video clip on that through Drive-Through History. I don't think I have, there's a clip of it on YouTube, so I won't be able to show that to you, but it's very, very interesting. But another thing that I think America, the Story of Us addresses this in a video clip, that one of the routes that Washington's men used to get out of New York City was an old Indian trading trail called Broadway. And so it was called the Broadway because it was a broad trail that the Indians used coming and going when they were trading with other Indian tribes. And of course, Broadway still exists today. It goes into New York City, and it's where all of the Broadway musicals are. So just kind of an interesting factoid there. So that was in August and September of 1776, so right after independence. A couple months go by. Washington's having a hard time holding on to his men. His recruitment is not very successful because Congress is not supplying the army what they need. People aren't getting paid. Congress at the time didn't have the power to collect taxes. They could only ask the states to collect taxes and support the effort. And so it was a pretty dire situation by the time December rolled around. And what Washington knew is that many of the recruits that were fighting with him, their tour of duty expired on December 31st. And so half his army was going to disband at the end of December, and he needed a big win, in order to convince people that the cause was worth fighting for and that they had hope. And so Washington decided to try this crazy, daring, middle of the night over Christmas attack on British forces in Trenton, New Jersey. So Trenton was pretty close to Philadelphia, which was the end goal for the British. They wanted to capture Philadelphia. And so generally speaking, during this era, armies didn't fight during the wintertime. They waited for the spring and summer and fall to fight. And so this was supposed to be a downtime. So the British had they had hired some German Hessians or German mercenaries to come over and fight because they were so stretched thin for all of their fighting around the world. And so there were several thousand German soldiers fighting on behalf of the British that were in Trenton, New Jersey, and they were keeping an eye on Washington's men, making sure they didn't get away. And so on the evening of Christmas, 1776, during Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, the German Hessians were celebrating Christmas. They were doing a lot of drinking. The man in charge, the captain in charge, I can't remember his name right now, Washington had sent ahead a spy who was supposed to pretend to be a Tory, a loyalist to the king, and entertain the captain of the German Hessians and get him to drink all night long so that he would be worthless once Washington's troops got there. And that's exactly what happened. So the Germans drank all day on Christmas, went to sleep, no fear that anything was coming. But what they didn't realize is that George Washington and his men were crossing the Delaware River in a horrible sleet and snowstorm. Once they crossed the Delaware River, that very famous crossing of the Delaware River, the painting that you see in the video or on the PowerPoint, when they got to the other side, they had to march several miles to Trenton, New Jersey, and they arrived as the sun was rising, and they fired some cannons. They surrounded the town. The Germans came running in, stumbling out, completely hung over and not able to get in line, and several thousand of them had to surrender. The captain came running out, ended up getting shot and killed. And when they went through his personal belongings, they found a note in his pocket that was addressed to him that had been delivered the night before, that said, "Washington is on the march, beware," but he never opened the letter. So, again, God intervened. And so this was a huge victory for George Washington. It encouraged the recruits to re-register, to re-enlist. It was a victory he desperately needed. And then he had another victory just a couple of days later outside of Princeton, New Jersey, where he was very, very brave, ran ahead of his men who were scared and retreating, and he ran ahead and bullets flying, fortunately missed him, and encouraged them to charge on. So, and I believe he also captured a whole bunch, many more prisoners of war in that battle as well. So as 1776 comes to a close, what seemed like a horrible, dire situation, there's a little bit of silver lining around the cloud. So there is a link to a short, whoops, another text message. There is a link to a short review of the Battle of Trenton, and it's the drive-through history guide. It's a little corny, but it's got a good information, so I want you to watch that as well. It's about 9 minutes long. So there's probably 12 minutes of videos, and then my video here, which is looks like it's going to be about 22, 23 minutes long. I think that's it. That's probably as far as I'll get in class, because you know how it is. When I'm in front of you guys, I tend to talk a little bit more. So anyway, I'm going to upload this to Google Classroom so that you have it around our class time, and I will see you later. Bye.